Hello race fans watching around the world. Welcome back to Snowman Cycling. I am Jake Sanderson, taking you through another action-packed adventure as we return to our Zwift racing recap videos, as things get wild and wacky as we tackle 25 kilometers of wandering flats in Makuri Islands. And this one is chocked full of talking points and mistakes from me, with the aim, as always with these videos, to try and give you guys an understanding of the tactics that I use in these Zwift races, why I use them, and as we'll look at today, what you do when those tactics don't play out as you expect them to, and you have to think on your feet, and why it's always important to have a plan B at the back of your mind. So with that in mind, let's jump into this one and have a look at the action. The first 8.5k of this one was pretty uneventful, pretty quiet, not a lot happened until we reached this point, where you can see that there's a rider off the front. Zwart has made an attack. They countered over the top of another couple of small attacks and have committed here, going all in over 5 watts per kilo. And as we'll have a look at, this gap seems to just go out. I came to the front of the group, closed it down a little bit, made sure there was only one rider on the front. But in my opinion, this is a long way out to go with a break like this, especially on the flat. It's very, very far for a solo rider to make it. And as one of the riders notes in the chat there, the guy off the front is at 201 heart rate. So he's probably going pretty hard here. Not sure if he's going to be able to sustain that until the end. But we don't want to let him get too much of a break. So I come to the front and I start pacing. You do not see me do this very often. It's extremely rare for me to want to do that, but I just want to keep him within sort of arm's length. I don't want to let him get too far. And as we can see from that other chat comment, his heart rate maxes out at 208, so we know he's probably not quite at the limit just yet, but we're going to need to keep that under control. We're going to need to keep an eye on him. And this is where the first mistake that I make comes into play, because I think that these riders in this group don't have much energy. Nobody's working, nobody's helping control the pace on the front to stop this guy getting too big a gap. So I elect that if they're cooked, I'm going to move up, not let this guy get a gap that's any bigger. 15-16 seconds is too much. I don't want it to get any bigger, and let this guy solo TT his way to a win whilst I'm sat in the group behind going easy. But perhaps the riders in the group behind felt like this was way too early, which is why they weren't working particularly hard, because as soon as I attack off the front, I notice that behind the big numbers come, everybody puts in an acceleration, and they're not going to let me get away easily. So I sit up and I elect to start the mind games myself this time, taking a page from our friend Rasmussen's idea from a couple of weeks ago's video. I've decided that if they're going to play games, well, I can play games too. So we're going to make sure we do that to keep things under control and try and get a bit of use out of these riders around us and see if we can't con them into taking a turn or two to help us keep that rider off the front under control and give us a shout of catching him a bit later on. And that means, unfortunately for me, rather than just moaning in the chat, I'm going to have to come to the front of the group and I'm going to have to take my turn, lead by example, show these guys how it's done and what we need to do to get this guy back within catching distance. So that's what I do on this little rise here. Remember that if you're trying to catch somebody out in front, you're going to need to do on the front of your mini peloton a higher pace than they are doing out front. Otherwise, that gap is just going to get bigger. And at this point, I'm concerned with trying to get one or two of the stronger riders to do a bit of work. So I come to the front of the group, I take a turn, make sure that they can see me doing some work, and then I get on the chat. I say to one of the stronger riders, Raphael, it's your turn. Come to the front of the group and take a pull, hoping that that is going to pressure him into doing some work for us, especially seeing as he's one of the stronger riders that's likely to be there at the end. Unfortunately for me, he doesn't take the bait, he doesn't bite, and he doesn't put in much effort, but this group does seem to be working a little bit better cohesively than it was before. I'm making sure to take the odd turn, Susko's making sure to take the odd turn, and the Japanese rider is also doing the same thing. And at this point, Susko makes a prophetic prediction saying that he thinks that the rider out front, Zwart, is going to blow. And I guess he was keeping a really close eye on that rider's heart rate and FTP. Or maybe he's just missed out on his career calling of being a fortune teller or palm reader. But whatever the case, he's definitely read the tea leaves correctly this time. Because as we take a look at Zwart's numbers, all of a sudden, you'll notice that they start to drop as he pops. With his heart rate at maximum, that power just drops down. And before I even get the chance to accuse him of doping or being a sandbagger, he selfishly quits out of the race. No doubt with his tail tucked between his legs and his head down. I'm not sure that those are the best tactics for racing, but you kind of have to respect his single-mindedness. He decided he was going to commit to that move until he hit max heart rate and his legs literally gave out. And rather than being caught by the rest of the group and dealing with that shame, He elects to quit out of the race. So what do you think? Was that a good move from him? Should he have just tried to carry on? He did have a 30-second gap. Even if he was popped, he probably could have gone for a bit longer and held us off. And were my tactics right? Was I right to try and instigate a chase and then back off? My thinking was really to just sit in, and then when we hit that rise, I was going to go all in, try and bridge that 20-second gap with one huge effort up to him, leave this group behind me. But by this point, that doesn't matter anymore because we've hit the climb, the guy on the front is gone, and the race is right here. And at this point, my plan is pretty simple. It's pretty much the plan that I had at the start of the race, which is get to this climb and then go all in, launch it with one big attack a couple of kilometers out. Try and get rid of all of these riders and attack my way to a glorious solo victory. Unfortunately for me, there's one problem with that plan, and it's that these riders around me are really, really strong on this climb. They're really pushing the pace, and it's hurting here just to sit in the wheels. Couple that with the fact that this is my first race for over a month. I made those mistakes earlier on with those chases and those attacks, and all of a sudden, I do not feel great. But sometimes on the bike, feelings are just feelings. And that's why we have these plans ready to roll. So I decide that the best defense is a good offense, and I'm going to go through with my attack anyway. It's better to try and attack here and get dropped than to just get dropped off the back anyway. So we may as well attack and see what happens. So that's what I do. I elect to go all in. I hit 500 watts plus and I try to get a gap on these riders. But the legs just aren't working the way I want them to. There's still 4 kilometers left. I'm not sure if you just spotted it, but I made 2 mistakes there when I launched my attack. Firstly, I went from the front of the group. What I should have done is gone from the back of the group and got up to speed as I passed them, so it was harder for them to connect onto me. But secondly, and more importantly, the huge mistake that I made here was I just left it to too close to the top of the climb. I'm running out of hill to try and kill my opposition off before the end of this race. And if I'd gone halfway up that climb, I would have had longer to put more of a gap into them. And that meant that when we hit this flat top, I would have had a bigger gap to try and protect. But unfortunately for me, as a 60 kilo solo rider, this is a flat top. As soon as it gets to the top, it levels out, there's no descent. And it means that even with all that energy, I've still only got a 20-30 meter gap to the riders behind. And at this point, I know it's going to be really difficult. I shake my head. That's the point where I give up the ghost. I decide that this attack is not worth the energy anymore. I am not going to be able to stay away from these riders. So instead, I need to make sure that as they come past me, I get onto their wheel. And that means now with 3.4k to go, we've got ourselves into the difficult position of being cooked, clueless, and clinging on for dear life, whilst trying to figure out a way that we're going to be able to maximise our chances of getting a good result in this race. And that's why it's always a great thing to be able to fall back on your sprint. And know that even if we can't get rid of everybody, we'll still take our chances in the sprint shootout, knowing that we've got a half decent punch. And that means I'm also expecting the attacks to be coming thick and fast from about 1.5k out, especially from the guys with no sprint. And looking at Zwift power, I'm including our man on the front, Raphael, who's attacking there with that group with no sprint. So I know if he wants to win, he's got to go now and he's got to go all in, which means I cannot let him get away. Our man Susco from earlier realises the same thing and he puts in an acceleration too. So the two of us bridge our way up to Raphael as we go into the Flamme Rouge with the Japanese and the Swedish rider binned off at the back. And they're in a really difficult position of trying to win this one now. It's probably going to be one of the 3 riders in the front that's going to take this home. And knowing that I'm going to sit in and sit back for the sprint, I'm going to try and get this rider Susco to bridge me up as far as he can, or at least as far as he's willing to, with the aim of getting me as close to that finish line without either of these 2 riders getting off the front as possible. And with about 500 meters to go, you can see that the riders all sit up. Everybody starts to look at each other like they do in the pro races.
Get ready, get ready.
Because remember, nobody really wants to go first, and nobody really wants to go from the front either.
Okay, here we go.
And with one eye on the Japanese rider behind who's just about to reconnect, I decide it's time to go. As we launch our patented Snowman Sprint all in, everything we've got hit 950 watts, just under 16 watts per kilo. Not bad for the end of a race like this where it's already cooked. And as we take a look behind, that burst of power is going to be just too much for the riders behind to get back on, even though Susco has a great sprint, which means I get to launch my port celebrations once again. Thank you to subscribers, Tragic Happy Hour, and Ashley Harper for the shush and the rocking the baby. Great ones there, guys. Thank you for that. Please let me know your other suggestions in the comments down below. And as we take a quick look at the Zwift power results there, we can see that the normalized power quite a bit higher than the average power. Normalized power was about 3.8, 3.9 watts per kilo. None of the power values particularly high, but it's just the attrition of those attacks and that nasty race that added up by the end. Great training, getting me back to where I need to be. And a massive thank you to all old and recent subscribers. We're so close to my target of 1,000 subs. You guys have been fantastic, so thank you massively. Thank you to my Patreon subscribers. Your support means everything. I hope you enjoyed this video as always. Make sure you like, comment, most importantly subscribe. And as always, race fast, ride hard, and remember that you are appreciated.